I didn't expect to hear her voice again, let alone in my best friend's kitchen. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and lemon cleaner, the kind of smell that made the place feel like it had been lived in for years, even though it had only been a few months since they moved back into town. I was here to help him fix a loose cabinet hinge before heading out for the day. That was the plan. But when she walked in from the back door, hair pinned up in a loose, messy twist, sleeves rolled to her elbows, the plan didn't matter anymore. "Daniel." She paused, her voice warm but surprised. "I didn't know you grew up this well." It was playful, not quite teasing, but it landed somewhere deeper. She looked me over like she was taking inventory of all the years since she last saw me. I'd been just a kid then, tagging along with her son. Now, well, I didn't feel like a kid anymore. I smiled, trying to keep it casual. "Guess time does that to people." Her eyes held mine a fraction too long, like she'd noticed something she wasn't supposed to. Then she moved past me to set down a grocery bag, the brush of her arm grazing mine just enough to make me aware of how close she was. I caught myself watching the way her hand tightened on the paper bag before she let go, like she'd caught herself, too. We made small talk, or tried to. She asked about college, about work, her tone light, but her gaze kept flicking toward me when she thought I wasn't looking. My answers were short, maybe too short. I didn't trust myself with more. The kitchen was quiet except for the faint ticking of a wall clock. My best friend had gone upstairs to grab something, leaving just the two of us in this stillness that seemed to press in around us. I bent down to check the hinge, my back to her, but I could feel her presence behind me. The faint sound of her shifting her weight, the way she inhaled before speaking. "You always this helpful?" she asked softly. "Or is this just for me?" Should have been a joke. Sounded like one. But there was an edge to it, something that made the space between us feel charged. I glanced over my shoulder. "Guess you'll have to find out." Her lips parted just slightly, like she had something to say but thought better of it. Then she looked away, busying herself with unpacking groceries that didn't need to be unpacked yet. The door creaked upstairs, his footsteps coming back down. She straightened, smoothing her shirt, but her eyes found mine one last time before he walked in. And in that split second, I knew. Whatever that was, it wasn't going away. If my best friend hadn't gotten a call from work, I'd have been gone in 5 minutes. Instead, he muttered something about needing to run an errand and left me standing there with her. "Shouldn't take him long," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She leaned against the counter, casual, but I caught the faint crease between her brows. The kind that shows up when someone's mind is somewhere else entirely. I tightened the last screw on the cabinet hinge, but my hands lingered on the tool, pretending to double-check my work. My pulse was ridiculous for such an ordinary moment. "You've changed," she said after a pause. I laughed softly, still crouched. "So have you." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Not always for the better." It was the kind of line people throw away, but I didn't. I turned to look at her, and for a second, she didn't hide it. The faint exhaustion, the way her shoulders sloped like she'd been holding too much for too long. "Rough year?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. "Rough few years." She tried to smooth it over with a shrug, but the words stayed in the air between us. I stood and set the screwdriver down. Something in me wanted to fill the space, to make her forget whatever had put that look in her eyes. Instead, I noticed the smaller things. The faint citrus scent from her soap, the tiny scar just above her wrist, the way her voice softened when she spoke low. Felt dangerous to notice so much, but I did anyway. "You ever feel like you wake up one day and you don't recognize your own life?" she asked suddenly. I swallowed. "All the time." She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment it felt like we were standing in the same place, even if we were years apart. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She ignored it. "You should stay," she said quietly. "Just for a bit. I could use the company." It wasn't the words that got me. It was the way her fingers brushed my arm when she said them, light, almost absent-minded, but warm enough to leave a mark. I opened my mouth to say something. I don't even know what, but the words caught in my throat. Outside, a car door slammed. My best friend was back. And all I could think was that I didn't want to leave. He'd only stopped by again to drop off the drill I forgot to return. That was the excuse I told myself. The afternoon light slanted across the living room, catching the dust in the air. She was curled on the couch in an oversized sweater, knees tucked under her. Not made up for company. Not trying to be anything but herself. Somehow that made her harder to look at. "Didn't expect you today," she said, smiling faintly. "But I'm glad you came." Her voice had that low, late-afternoon softness. I set the drill on the coffee table. Didn't want to keep it too long. She patted the space beside her. "Sit for a minute, unless you're in a rush." I wasn't. I sat. On the side table, a framed photo caught my eye, her years younger, with someone's arm around her shoulders. His arm. I'd heard pieces of the story from my friend. The separation, the fights no one talks about. Seeing the picture made it harder to pretend she wasn't carrying something heavy. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed on the photo. Then, almost to herself, "Some days I'm fine. Other days I wonder if this is it. If nothing better is coming." The words landed in me like a dare. I wanted to tell her something reckless, that she was wrong, that something better could be sitting right next to her. Instead, I shifted, my knee brushing hers. Not much, but neither of us moved it away. Her phone rang in the kitchen, the sound slicing through the air. She didn't move to answer it. "You can get that," I murmured. "It's not important," she said, but her eyes stayed on mine. For a few seconds, nothing else existed. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the space between us. "I think about you," she said suddenly, then winced, like she hadn't meant for it to slip out. "I mean, what you've been up to, how you've changed. That's all." I should have laughed it off, said something safe, but instead, I leaned in just slightly, enough to feel the warmth from her skin. A knock at the door jolted us both back. She stood quickly, smoothing her sweater like it was armor. From the couch, I watched her open the door to a neighbor, exchanging small talk I couldn't hear. When she turned back, her smile for them faded. But for me, it lingered. And in that moment, I knew we were closer to crossing the line than either of us wanted to admit. It was supposed to be simple. Help her bring in the groceries before the rain started. We worked side by side in the narrow hallway, the air damp from the storm outside. Every time I brushed past her, the scent of her shampoo cut through the smell of wet asphalt. Too close, too easy to notice. She handed me a bag and our fingers locked around the handle for a second too long. Neither of us let go right away. "You can't keep looking at me like that," she said quietly. I froze. "Like what?" Her eyes flicked up, searching mine. "Like you're thinking things you shouldn't." She didn't say it like an accusation. More like she was asking if it was true. I stepped back, setting the bag on the counter. "Maybe I am. Doesn't mean I'll do anything about it." Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. "That's the problem." The rain picked up, drumming against the windows. We stood there, the space between us thick with everything unspoken. "I don't want to make your life complicated," I said. "It already is," she replied, and the way she said it, flat, certain, felt like an invitation and a warning in the same breath. I leaned against the counter, studying her. The damp had curled loose strands of her hair. Her sweater slipped off one shoulder, and she didn't bother fixing it. "You're not supposed to," I started, then trailed off. "Want you?" she finished for me, her voice barely above the rain. I exhaled, slow. "Something like that." The thunder cracked, and for a second, the lights flickered. She stepped closer, maybe to hear me better, maybe for something else. I felt the heat from her even before she touched me. just her fingertips, brushing the inside of my wrist. "Tell me to stop," she whispered. I didn't. We stood there like that, her hand on my wrist, my breath uneven, until a car pulled into the driveway, headlights slicing through the rain-streaked glass. She let go. I didn't move. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but her eyes weren't. "What happens if neither of us stops?" The sound of the car door slamming outside was the only thing keeping us from finding out. It happened by accident. I'd come by to drop off the umbrella she'd left in my truck after the storm. Her car was in the driveway, door ajar, a couple of grocery bags still inside. I knocked, but the house was quiet. Then I heard her voice. Not from the kitchen, but down the hallway, muffled behind a half-closed door. "I can't keep doing this," she was saying. "He's too young. It's wrong. I should have left right then." Instead, I froze. There was a pause, and then her voice again, softer. "But he's the only one who makes me feel seen anymore." The words hit me so hard I didn't notice the creak in the floorboard until she stepped into the hall. Her expression shifted, surprise, then a flicker of something else. "You weren't supposed to hear that," she said, her voice tight. "I wasn't trying to," I said, setting the umbrella on the table. My chest felt tight. "But you meant me, didn't you?" She looked away, leaning against the wall like it was the only thing holding her up. "It doesn't matter. We can't." "Why?" The word came out sharper than I meant. "Because I'm younger? Because it's messy? You think I don't know that?" Her eyes snapped to mine, and for a moment, neither of us blinked. "You have your whole life ahead of you," she said. "You don't know what it's like to be this far in and wonder if you've already missed the best parts." I stepped closer, slow. "Maybe the best parts are still coming." She laughed. A short, almost broken sound, and shook her head. "You don't even know me as well as you think." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me everything." Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the moment. She glanced at the screen, then shoved it back without answering. "You should go," she said finally, though her voice didn't match the words. But I didn't move. "If I leave now, you know I'll come back." Something in her face changed. A mixture of frustration and something dangerously close to hope. The silence stretched until she finally said, "Then maybe I should stop answering the door." I wanted to tell her she wouldn't. I wanted to say I'd make sure she didn't have to. Instead, I just looked at her and she looked back, like we were both standing on the edge of something we couldn't climb down from. It had been 3 days since I'd seen her. 3 days of trying not to replay her voice in my head. The way she'd looked at me like she was both daring me to stay and begging me to go. I told myself I was just driving by. But when I saw her on the porch, sweater wrapped around her like a shield, I knew I wasn't leaving without an answer. She didn't look surprised. "Daniel," she said, my name soft, almost careful. "You shouldn't be here." I stepped up onto the porch. "You've said that before." She crossed her arms, but it wasn't defensive. More like she was holding herself together. "And you've ignored me before." "I heard what you said the other day," I said, "about feeling seen." Her eyes closed briefly, as if she could will the moment away. "I shouldn't have. But you did," I cut in. "And I can't stop thinking about it. About you." For a long moment she didn't answer. The wind caught her hair, and she tucked it back slowly, deliberately, like she was buying herself time. "If we're going to do this," she started, then stopped. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. "If we're going to do this, you need to understand. I'm not some perfect thing you get to keep untouched. I've made mistakes. I'm going to make more." I took a step closer, close enough to feel the faint heat radiating from her. "Then I'll take the mistakes too." Her breath caught. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly she was in my arms, her forehead resting against my chest. It wasn't some sweeping kiss or grand moment. It was smaller, heavier, like we'd both been holding our breath for weeks and finally exhaled. She pulled back just enough to look at me. "You're going to make my life harder." "Good," I said, smiling faintly. "Yours is already too easy." That earned the smallest laugh, shaky but real. Her hand slid down my arm, fingers threading with mine. "Then I guess we're doing this." It wasn't a promise, not exactly. But it was enough to make me believe we weren't going to keep pretending. Inside, the phone rang. Neither of us moved. We just stood there, holding on to something we both knew we couldn't give back. We didn't rush anything after that night on the porch. It was slow, cautious, 100 small steps that added up to something neither of us could deny anymore. We learned to exist in the same room without that constant tension making every breath feel dangerous. We learned to talk about real things, not just the flirting, not just the lines we were towing. But we also learned that some people would never understand. My best friend found out months later, not because we told him, but because he noticed. People notice when you look at someone like they're the only one in the room. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were silences, some anger, and a few weeks where I didn't hear from him at all. But time has a way of dulling sharp edges, and eventually, he saw that this wasn't a fling or some passing impulse. We were still standing. One night, sitting on her back steps with the smell of rain in the air again, she said, "We're not the same people we were when this started." She was right. She wasn't carrying herself like someone bracing for disappointment anymore. The guilt I'd seen in her eyes that first day in the kitchen was gone, replaced with something steadier. She'd stopped apologizing for wanting things, and I'd stopped pretending I didn't. "I don't regret it," I told her. "Any of it." She smiled, slow and sure, and rested her head against my shoulder. "Good, because I'm not letting you." It struck me then. This whole thing had started with a comment in a kitchen, a half-playful line that neither of us had meant to turn into anything more. And yet here we were. Maybe life isn't about finding the perfect timing or the perfect person. Maybe it's about seeing the person in front of you, really seeing them, and deciding they're worth whatever comes next. We didn't have some grand declaration or a perfect ending. We just had each other, and the quiet certainty that we'd fought for something real. And that was enough.